We can now bring in Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commanding general of the U.S. Army Europe. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Ukraine was getting Patriot missiles from the United States before that brief pause that was announced by the Pentagon, but quickly reversed. What realistically will this new announcement change on the battlefield?
Well, of course, we don't know, and that's the problem. We don't know that he's actually going to do this. The president has many times said, he's going to inflict consequences on Putin, and then he backs away. And so it's honestly, well, I hope he does provide more weapons and capabilities to Ukraine. It's in the interest of all of us. I remain a skeptic until I see it actually happening. Now, I think most Ukrainians would tell you that their number one requirement or need that they have is for air defense. So Patriot is good for certain things like airplanes and missiles, but they won't do anything to help against these hundreds of drones that are hitting Ukrainians every night.
So then what does Ukraine need to change the dynamic on the battlefield?
I think they need three things. Number one, they need specifically more capability to strike long range to hit the place from which drones and missiles and airplanes are taking off inside Russia, as well as Russia's industry that manufactures the drones that they use. So we would say kill the archer is better than trying to intercept all the arrows. Number two, the sanctions package that Senator Graham talks about, of course, this will help because it will make it difficult for Russia to continue exporting oil to India and China and other users, which gives it the revenues necessary to keep prosecuting the war. And then, of course, I'm completely in favor of providing Patriot interceptors and more systems to Ukraine, but we should not think that that's going to solve the drone problem.
I want to talk about the sanctions package in just a minute, but we're going to have Donald Trump, who's going to speak later today. Knowing the U.S. president, he will probably say that the war would not have started if he were president, but he is president now. Is he abandoning the diplomatic effort to bring this conflict to an end?
But it sounds like you got a sneak peek at his speech, because that is exactly what he probably will include, is some sort of blame on the previous administration. Nonetheless, no, I don't think he's abandoning it. But he is finally, it seems, if this is accurate, it seems like he is finally going to start using the leverage he has over Vladimir Putin, which is the ability to damage Russia's oil industry, to damage Russia's economy, which is already very fragile, and to, of course, use the American industry and encourage Europeans to provide more capabilities to Ukraine in order to get Russia to the negotiating table.
You mentioned Senator Lindsey Graham, because in his interview yesterday with CBS News, he said that the sanctions package, he actually called it a sledgehammer. But we have seen sanctions from Europe. We have seen sanctions from the United States, which were promised to influence Vladimir Putin's thinking. I recall the former U.S. President Joe Biden, who said that the ruble will be turned to rubble. We know that Moscow has a way of circumventing sanctions. Yes, we haven't had seen sanctions on its oil exports, but Russia is playing the long game, isn't it?
Well, certainly, sanctions only work if they are fully enforced. And there are too many countries and companies, including some companies in the United States, that have worked around these. And India, frankly, continues to be one of the biggest laundering countries when it comes to allowing things to get to Russia that were otherwise on sanctions lists. And of course, the Russian oligarchs, the people that have all the money, have done a pretty good job of hiding their assets or distancing themselves from those assets. So the sanctions are not a magic solution, but they've got to be part of an overall strategy. I do think that what Senator Graham is proposing, and it seems to have enormous support in the Congress, will make a difference, because it will go directly to those countries that are importing Russian oil. And so, that China, India, others will have to think twice about whether or not they keep accepting the oil from these illegal shadow fleet vessels.
If Donald Trump does go ahead and up the sanctions on Moscow, will the U.S. be the best positioned to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table? Because it has, up until now, been kind of successful in doing it.
Well, Europe, the combined economies of all the nations of the EU, that's without UK, without Norway, they dwarf Russia's economy and dwarf Russia's industrial capacity. So the EU could also be doing much more if all the nations of the Union were working together to use their leverage. It certainly is much better and more compelling if
You're
you have the
talking about more
United States,
sanctions from
UK.
Europe?
Yeah, of course. And look, it's not just about adding sanctions, it's about enforcing sanctions.
I mean, they did
Germany,
recently unveil the 18th round of sanctions.
it doesn't matter. You have to enforce the sanctions. I mean, look at the export of German cars to Kazakhstan. It's shot up here in the last couple of years. I don't think that's because the market in Kazakhstan changed. It's because many nations are sending products through different countries that still end up in Russia. So this is where the Union, I think, can really tighten the enforcement of sanctions.
Yeah, because again, Russia does have a way of circumventing sanctions. I even saw an article about how the import of toasters went up, I think, from Azerbaijan because they needed some certain component in these toasters. I mean, this is the thing. Like, where does this conflict go on? Do we continue to arm Ukraine? Because fundamentally on the battlefield, is it a stalemate? You're former Lieutenant General. You tell me what you're seeing on the battlefield.
Well, first of all, think about this. After 11 and a half years with Russia having every advantage and without the West being committed to helping Ukraine win, Russia has failed to defeat Ukraine. And they don't have the ability to actually defeat Ukraine. All that Russia can do right now is continue to kill innocent Ukrainian civilians. The amount of territory that they have now is almost identical to what they had over a year ago, despite losing hundreds of thousands of casualties. The Russian Air Force does not dare fly in Ukraine's airspace. The Russian Black Sea Fleet, nowhere to be seen. So Ukraine has stopped Russia, but Ukraine also does not have the ability to continue to protect its civilians from the kind of attacks that you're showing right there.
What do you think switched in Donald Trump's mind to realize that Vladimir Putin was not serious about bringing this war in Ukraine to an end?
I think he finally has woken up to the realization that almost everybody else already had, was that Putin has zero interest in actually negotiating an acceptable settlement to this conflict. Vladimir Putin has never changed his objective of destroying Ukraine as a state, or even the idea of Ukraine as a sovereign state. And so whenever he or Lavrov talks about they have to address the root causes of the war, that's exactly what he's talking about. So now President Trump finally realizes that Putin has been stringing him along, playing him, and he finally appears to have gotten pissed off enough about it to do something about it. That's what I've been hoping for months. I hope that that's what we're going to see.
Do you think, final question, do you think that Donald Trump can avoid the political backlash of continuing to send more weaponry to Ukraine, given that he's sending the European Union the bill?
A backlash from who?
Because when he campaigned on ending this war in one day.
Yeah, okay. Well, nobody believed that, number one, and we're 6 months past that already. So for sure, he's not going to do that. But what he will manage to do, if he follows through on everything he's saying, is that he will turn this into some kind of a thing where not only did he get the Russians to stop doing what they're doing, but he got Europe to pay for it, which in a strange, sort of ironic way, is what he always said about the wall with Mexico, that he would get the Mexicans to pay for it. Now, I don't like the style. What's missing, of course, is a real clearly defined strategic outcome, but I will support almost anything that helps Ukraine.
Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.